Hello, and welcome to We Turned Out Okay. This is the show where we are always working to help you walk your chosen path and not the one that somebody else told you you ought to be on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Karen Kolp. I am a coach. I am a teacher, I think. I'm a consultant. I'm a trusted advisor, a lot of different things. And I am here today with my friend, Zovig Garboushian. She is a fellow coach, and I'm so excited to bring you on the show, Zovig, because we get to talk about one of the most important things in my life and this thing that I'm doing a lot of research on, which is play.
Yes, I'm excited to be here, Kay. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I just remembered, I think I introduced myself as Karen Kolp, and listeners know me now as both Karen and Kay. And Zovig, we were just talking about this before we hit record. I've really grown into this nickname, and for me it is very playful, and it means there's an aspect of creativity that comes into my life when I think about Kay that isn't there when I think about Karen, and it's been really interesting to kind of tap into that.
Almost like an alter ego, right? Like this is your you put on your cape and now you're Kay with play, like K for play. Like
yeah. In fact, I just noticed
opens that door.
I'm wearing my Coach K shirt. A client of mine gave me this shirt, and I'm like, oh, I love this. I usually think of it as K squared. It's like it's short for K squared because I'm multidimensional. And I have a friend who as soon as she found out, she's always known me as Karen, and when she found out I have this nickname, she was like, oh my God, it's like a trail name. So when you hike, when you do like a long-term sort of through hiking, you are given a trail name oftentimes, and you sign books with it, and people come to know you as that. And I'm like, I love that.
Oh, I've never heard of that. I'm not a hiker. I'm not the most outdoorsy of people, so I would not know that reference, but I love that.
Cool. Well, thank you for being with us today. I don't know if I want to jump right in. I guess I do if you do, and we can talk about play. How'd you get here? Maybe a good question is, how'd you get here?
Here meaning your podcast, here meaning my coach profession. Which part of here?
Wherever you would like to start. I mean, I would just love to hear about it from your perspective.
Okay, so I don't know why the first place my mind goes is, well, I'm a former New Yorker. I don't know why that still seems to be part of my story. I think it's an important part of my story. I'm originally from California. I moved to New York City September 22nd, 2001. So 11 days after 9/11.
Wow.
I was 22 years old. I moved there for work. I worked in media and at magazines. And I lived in that city and grew up in that city and created my life and discovered who I was in that city. And New York City is the best school for understanding who you are, understanding what your boundaries are, learning how to draw your boundaries, learning what you're made of, essentially. And so I decided that I needed to leave. I had basically done everything I could do. I ate all the food. I saw all the shows. I shopped all the stores. I dated everybody. There was no one left, so I had to go. And really, I just was burned out. I was tired. I was fatigued. I couldn't seem to find what it was for me, at least from a professional standpoint, that was fulfilling and exciting and joyful. And I was really struggling with that. And a lot of different things kind of converged, but I made the choice to move. And so now I live outside of Seattle, Washington, in a small kind of rural-ish town called Woodinville. And in my time here, I have become a coach. I found my life partner, my fiance. And I've reestablished and relearned all of the things that I learned in New York. All of that was valuable and important to me. All of those lessons and who I understood myself to be were very meaningful and important. And then when I left, I realized, I think there might be a lot more to me than just that New Yorker vibe. And so what I've been able to discover here is that that side of me that's still incredibly powerful, but has less of an edge. And so that's what I try to bring into my coaching. That's what I try to bring into my relationships. That's what I try to bring into the relationship I have with myself. Like, still powerful, still kick ass, still effective, formidable when need to be, but I don't have to have that edge because I don't need it. I don't need it. Yeah.
Is that edge that you describe? I mean, I can picture it like I'm walking here, you know what I
I'm
mean?
walking
Like
over here. Exactly. Yeah.
Is that edge something that you went to New York? Did you know that that was going to become a part of what you needed there? And did you need it?
I needed it there.
Yeah.
I believe I needed it there. I did not know, I don't think I knew how it would develop. However, I remember standing in the airport when I got there. It was such a sweltering humid day. It was like 8 o'clock at night. I was standing at the baggage claim trying to retrieve my 2 giant suitcases. And I remember thinking, I felt the energy in the airport and the bustling, and I went, finally, a place where my sense of urgency has a purpose.
Oh.
So there was something in me that knew that like the person, I'm a mover, like I move, like I have a plan and I go. I don't dawdle. I never have, you know, we grew up in a family. I'm the oldest of 4. My mom had us in marching order all the time. Like you kind of have to with that many kids. It's like, you got to schedule, you got to do, you got to move. Yeah. And so I learned how to move quickly, and it didn't always play out well when I lived in California. People didn't understand my level of intensity. And so finally, when I got to New York, I'm like, oh, finally my intensity, my urgency, like it makes sense here. So I felt that, but that edge developed over time. And really all that was the protective mechanism. Like you are literally being bumped physically constantly. There's, you know, rare moment that you are actually alone outside or, you know, in public. And there are so many different people, mindsets, cultures, ways of living, literally bumping into each other physically and energetically all the time. And so you have to put up a shield, and there's an element of like, don't mess with me. Like, I don't have time for this. Don't mess with me. And so, yeah, the edge developed pretty quickly. And I needed it to navigate, to move through things, to cut through all of the extra, because there's a lot of extra everything there. And I will also say it's an amazing city. So this isn't like me saying, I'm not knocking it. Like that place is amazing.
No, I would love to kind of stay with the joys of New York for a little while, because you were there for quite a while.
I was from 22 to 39. I mean, the joys of New York is you can have and do and be whatever you want, whenever you want. And I loved that I had anonymity. Even though I was constantly surrounded by people, I loved that I was able to find a home for myself. You know, I lived in Manhattan for 4 years, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. I need quiet. And I moved to Brooklyn, to a not cool part of Brooklyn. And I had a giant apartment and, you know, rent controlled. And I stayed there for 13 years because I'm like, you don't give this up in New York City. And so, you know, it wasn't the coolest place to live, but it was my joy. I loved coming home to that place and finding solace and, you know, being quiet. I mean, I had fun. I had so much fun. Everything was fun. I was constantly seeking out fun. And even in my work, which was really rigorous. And, you know, I was in media and advertising. You could get beaten up in that industry. But I also learned how to find fun in all of that. And I shifted my career 2 or 3 times. And I also had a bunch of side hustles, and I became a yoga teacher. And so I found ways to have a lot of fun and joy there. And like I said, I really did that city inside and out. Everything you could do there, I did. You know, if there's an art class, I'm taking it. If there's a theater walk, I'm taking it. If there's a new restaurant, I'm going. If there, you know, so I did everything I could.
Wow. You are not the first person who has talked about about loving New York because of the fact that you're anonymous, surrounded by all these people. Like, I think, and the way it was described by a tremendous introvert to me was, I don't stick out. Like I can just fade back, and I don't have to worry about being seen. And it's like, wow, I'd never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, it's true. I don't stick out. And when I moved to Washington, I felt myself stick out immediately. I could feel it. I felt the energy. It was almost like my energy was being reflected back to me. when I would walk into a store, I could just
Mhm.
feel my own intensity,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
It was interesting, but
I
just
want
that
to,
didn't
I
happen there.
definitely want to ask more about that, about what it was like to kind of relocate to a quieter place. Um, but before we leave New York, I wonder, and I think you were there at the time that this particular art installation was happening. There was a time in Central Park where there were these big orange
The gates,
fabric. Do you remember that?
the gates. Yeah,
The
I was there. I
gates.
saw it.
You got to see the gates.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't think I understood how the magnitude of them. I kind of laughed at it. I was like, what the heck is going on? They're giant. And it was snowing at the time. So it was these bright orange arches, kind of, if I remember correct, arch type things with some curtains hanging. And it was really interesting. And, I went and I saw it and I walked through it. I walked around it. I looked at it. The sheer magnitude is what made it so amazing. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
installation art is interesting. You really have to, I think there are other qualities to art installations that you don't typically think about when you think of quote unquote art,
yeah, yeah,
it's the size of it, it's the physics of it, it's the backdrop on which they've decided to install the thing that makes it special. They picked Central Park for a reason. They could have picked Battery City. They could have, Battery Park City. They could have picked Prospect Park in Brooklyn. They could have picked any number of places, and they picked Central Park for a reason. And so you didn't even really ask the question, but you took me back to the memory, Kay. So I'm like, oh yeah,
yeah.
I remember that. I remember that installation. Yeah.
That's wicked cool. And the one kind of sort of installation art that I have seen that resonated with me in the same way was in Boston. This is probably now 4 or 5 years ago. Uh, an artist installed a gigantic net over part of the Greenway, the Rose Kennedy Greenway,
Mm.
and it was like an acre of net that was put up and suspended by ropes and wires from I feel like different buildings around it, and it was really high up, and it lit up like it was colorful. And it happened to be, so it was 6 years ago, I'm remembering, because it was the year that I started podcasting, and I was invited to go be part of like a panel of new podcasters at an event. I think it was called Podcast Boston or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was there all by myself. Like we live about 40 minutes out of the city, and I never go into the city by myself. Like I'm always with somebody else. So there was this real thrill and exhilaration of like stepping out of my comfort zone to go to this event, first of all, where I knew no one except the presenters. And I think there were probably 100 or so people there. And I remember, you have that feeling of like, it's the first day of school and you're like, is anybody going to be friendly? Like, am I going to know
Yeah.
anybody? So there was that. The other cool thing that happened on that same day was it happened to be the day of the Pride Parade in Boston. And the Pride Parade went past the building, the conference room that we were in. And it was like, so you're eating lunch and the Pride Parade is coming through, and there's confetti and there's horns and there's music and there's Mayor Marty Walsh like leading
Yeah.
it was awesome. And if I remember correctly, that was the same. I may be off by a little bit, because after that I did go in one other time by myself. But I think it was the same day, and I got to go and see the net. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, you're sitting underneath this work of art. And it's like, what? Like, I had the similar questions. Why here? Like, why did they make who came up with this thing?
Yeah.
It was fascinating to me. And I feel like what we're talking about maybe is a really good place to sort of overtly bring up the topic of play, which is something that I really wanted to get into with you.
Yeah.
Because it does bring up those questions, doesn't it? Like, you're looking at these wild things and you're like, but why?
But why? Yeah. And there might not always be a why. That's the
Yeah.
other thing I learned about art while I was there, is there isn't always a why around art. There's just an expression.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that. I love that it's just an expression.
Yeah.
of whatever's going on with the artist, of whatever the emotion and tenor is in the place in which they do the art. It's just an expression, and sometimes that's just enough.
Yeah. 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 Um, what else felt playful in New York?
Okay, what else felt playful in New York? Um, you know, everyone there that I encountered, people there were down to try anything.
Mm-hmm.
That is not something I experience in Washington. People in New York, you know, they say New Yorkers are rude, whatever. No, they're just efficient and they're direct. I don't find that rude, but they do want to connect. And there is a constant desire to be social. Now, obviously, with the pandemic, that's changed quite a bit. And I haven't been there in 3 years, so I don't know how that's evolved. But when I was there was a constant desire and genuine interest in being social and connecting. And so everything was an activity. You know, getting a manicure with a girlfriend was an activity. Food was an activity. Exercise was an activity that that I did with others. And that's what made those things so enjoyable. When I wanted to be with others, I had every opportunity to be with others. When I wanted to be alone, I had the opportunity to be alone. It was always my choice. And that felt very empowering. And there's nothing more empowering than choosing how you want to spend your time and your day and with who.
Yeah.
And I felt very empowered to say yes and to say no. I had no problem saying no thanks. Or, you know what, I think I'm going to do this by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. A really big value that I hold dear is the value of freedom.
Yeah.
And I feel like choice is a very big part of that. Choosing how you spend your time, choosing what you're doing, choosing what you're not doing. Do you find that that's a component of play and playfulness?
Absolutely. I mean, choice is the foundation for a freedom of choice. Personal freedom is the foundation of everything we do, I think.
Yeah.
Because I'm choosing to trust, I'm choosing to communicate, I'm choosing to be intimate, I'm choosing to have fun, I'm choosing to make something joyful rather than a slog.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't have fun and joy unless you choose it.
Yeah. I mean, this podcast sort of, it's evolved, but at the beginning, it was really about parents and kids, right? And for me, it still comes up with this idea of choice and how important choice is in what we do and how motivating it is to have the choice to be able to say no or yes, right? And for me, something that it often gets back into, and it is doing that right now, is self-motivated, like self-directed learning, the idea of self-directed learning. And I can wax on and on about self-directed learning, but I think what I'd love to do is hear about, did you have an experience of that as a kid growing up in California? Did you notice, did you ever think about, maybe in your education, but also like in your adult life, is self-direction a thing for you?
Self-direction. So tell me what you mean by that, a little more about what you mean by that.
I think what it gets back to, like when we think about education, especially, so there's an author named Blake Bowles who I got to see in person one time, and he had so many good things to say about self-direction. And in fact, part of it was when he was in college, he went to a university in California for like astrophysics. And while he was there, he was like, you know what? I hate this. Like, basically, people told him this would be a good career for you. It'll make you a lot of money. It's something that you should do. And he gets into the astrophysics program and he's like, actually, like, this is not me. And what he was allowed to do, I wish I could remember the name of it. It's a big university. It's like not Berkeley, but there's some other, just can't think of the name of it. Anyway, he was able to go to his advisor, and they crafted a program where he graduated in, I think his degree was technically in independent studies. And it was a hybrid of astrophysics and interviewing teenagers about homeschool teenagers about their education, which is sometimes called unschooled teenagers who have gotten to choose for themselves all along what they do, what they don't do. And I'm just remembering, actually, I'll write this down because I interviewed him for my podcast, so I can link to that. And with my own kids, they go, well, one of them is now in college, but the other one currently goes to a self-directed learning center. Like it's a, it's a high school where it's non-coercive. So you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, including go to classes. No one says you should do anything except, like even you can swear there, but what you can't do is say mean words, and any word could be a mean word. And it's like, wow, that's it. So it really helps. It puts the responsibility on the child, on the student, to be like, I got to think about this. Like, who am I hurting when I say this, or what, or whatever. And so non-coercion is a part of it. They offer outstanding classes. And so both of my kids have been so drawn into like Euclidean geometry and the humanities and music, and it just, so many interesting and cool classes. And then the third part of it is a mentorship, because a lot of young adults have, the only adults in their lives are authority figures. You should do this, you should do that, listen to me when I'm talking to you. And here is a place where they're equals. Like that, like one of the things that really appealed to my older son was, while he was learning math from an adult, that adult was learning physics from him.
Wow.
Because he knew more about physics than that person. And it was just so neat that there's this real equality, egalitarian kind of feeling. And so that's a very long rabbit hole about self-direction for young people, I guess, and in education.
I would say I did not have that experience growing up. Me and my siblings all went to private school through the 8th grade. Then we went to public high school. And then we all went to university. A couple of my sisters have master's degrees. I do not. I chose not to continue. So that's self-directed.
There you go. Yeah. When do I wrap up?
I was accepted into, actually, the person that went into astrophysics, I think it was, you said, and then decided this really isn't for me. I was going to pursue a degree in marriage and family therapy. I was accepted to a few different programs in California. And I was sitting in the prerequisite classes, few prereq classes we had to take prior to even interviewing, I think maybe to be qualified for the program or something, I don't know. And it was summer, and I had just graduated college, and I'm sitting in these rooms, and I'm looking, I was 20, barely 21. And I was looking around going, all of these people in here are adults, what I thought was an adult at the time, had been out there in the work field, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s. They've come back for their master's degrees. Here I am, 21 years old. I know how this is going to go. I'm going to take all the courses. I'm going to do all the hours. I'm going to get my degree, my certification and a license. And then what? I'm going to be a therapist at like 26, 27. Even I knew that was stupid. And so, I'm like, I haven't even experienced significant tragedy in my life yet. I hadn't, thankfully, not that that's a problem, but I knew enough. There was something in me that was like, wait, you don't know anything. What are you doing? And my love and passion for psychology still exists. It's why I'm a coach. It's why I taught yoga. It's why I was a stylist for women, like a personal shopper for women as a side hustle, because there was psychology built into all of those things. That was truly enjoyable and meaningful and fulfilling for me. But I knew enough to know, like, this is not my path. I don't think that this is the way I'm going to get what I want, is to be a marriage and family therapist. That it just doesn't feel like I'm equipped to do that at this point in my life at 21 years old.
Yeah.
So I chose to let that go. I would not say I had self-directed learning. It was all very prescriptive. It was traditional, and there's nothing really wrong with that, but oh my gosh, to be able to truly choose where to put my energy and my brain power as a kid, I don't know what that freedom would have done for me. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because I had to work to learn to shed traditional things so that I could make what I think are free and clear choices. Now, I know there's a lot of debate around choice, and are we ever really exercising freedom of choice? Is it actually our choice, or are is it so embedded in us that we think it's our choice? Like, there's a whole discussion to be had around that.
Yeah.
But as far as I can see with my naked eyes, I do now. I had to learn how to exercise my choice. And that came from getting into stuff that I didn't like, oh, wait, I don't like this. Oh, wait, that's not, oh, this kind of
Yeah.
sucks. Oh, this is really amazing. I'd like to learn more about this, do more with this, understand this person more. But I think that took me time, and it took me leaving my home state to go away, to have some space, to then discover those things for myself.
Wow.
So that I
Yeah.
didn't have and again, nothing was wrong here, but like, so that I didn't have sort of the traditional things coming up in my head and kind of coloring, well, what do I actually want? Is this right for me? And that took time and learning, and something intuitive told me, like, get out, go away, go far. And I went from California to New York. I don't know that I would have learned the freedom of my own choice had I not done that.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because at the very beginning you mentioned New York as learning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That place was learning.
I was thinking too, here's one way, because I was also traditionally educated in a public school in New England, and one really fascinating thing that has come up watching my children. So we homeschooled from the time that our oldest was 7. And then so the younger one never went to a school at all until he was going to Bay State, basically. And what I find absolutely fascinating is their enthusiasm over books. And I think about, like, one of my favorite books of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird. But when I was first assigned To Kill a Mockingbird, I have no clear memory of it. You know what I mean? Because I read it in high school. It was assigned to me. And so when I was in my 30s, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread To Kill a Mockingbird. I bet there's something in there. And I mean, since then, I've probably reread it like 10 times because I just find new stuff in it every time. It's really the same with Pride and Prejudice, which I remember there was a spark in high school when you get almost to the end of Pride and Prejudice and Lady Catherine de Bourgh shows up to really cuss out Elizabeth. And that was what woke me up. And I can remember reading Brave New World in 1984 and Animal Farm, and sort of like, oh, I've read them and forgetting about them, right? So so my youngest this past year, in the humanities, one of the books that they read was well, they read 1984. I knew that 1984 was not a book that I was going to want to revisit in any way. Like, I read it once and I was like, I'm good. But I remember when they read Brave New World, I was like, oh, I loved that book. I think you're going to love it. And he's reading like the opening chapters of Brave New World, and he's like, Mom, how can you say that you loved this horrible book where they've set up such an awful world? And he's talking about it in a way that he just invests so much more thinking and analysis and like synthesis into his reading than I ever did until I was like 30. Except in grad school, like I was very invested in the textbooks and those kinds of things. But like, and I just remember thinking, like, I was so turned off to all of those things because somebody was making me read it, whereas he's reading it of his own free choice. And so he's free to just be like, wow, what a book. Here are the thoughts that are coming up. And so that's one way. Another way that I think has been very interesting in their education is that they are incredibly outspoken. Like, there's been no one to say to them, I don't know, there's been no one to say like, that's a stupid opinion. And what that did for me was it kind of made me go, okay, well, I just won't share my opinions anymore. Like, I will look away and I will. And eventually what happened was I started thinking, well, I'm dumb. If I have these dumb opinions, then I must be dumb, right? Like, and they don't have any of that. It's been so interesting. Not that they haven't had conflicts and not that they haven't had challenges, but they haven't had the experience of being shut down by an authority figure, maybe is how I will say it. And that has been absolutely fascinating for me.
Interesting. Yeah. If someone were to say that's a stupid opinion, the defiant piece of me would be like, want to bet? So I had a different response to that kind of reaction to things that I might have said or thought. It was just inherent defiance. And I wonder, for me, if I hadn't been challenged, if I would have been able to stand up for myself quite in the same way.
So interesting.
Yeah, because the challenge is what triggers me to stand up a little taller and go, you sure about that? Like, you sure you want to challenge me here? No, I wasn't always like, I didn't always have grounding or my footing underneath me. Sometimes I was just reacting, like, I'm not saying it was all informed,
No,
defiant, but it did certainly teach me to think quickly on my feet.
Yeah.
And it did certainly teach me to look at myself and go, okay, I'm getting challenged on this. Do I like this? Am I digging my heels in because I'm stubborn? Am I digging my heels in because I really believe it? So I think that friction created a lot of learning for me.
Wow.
That works better for me.
Yeah.
A little bit of friction, to be always told or to not have anyone look, I'm not saying anybody should be rude I love the no mean words and respecting other people. But I think that something comes of dealing with friction, and we learn what we're made of in those moments.
Yeah.
And none of it is good or bad. You decided, okay, I'm not going to share that opinion. I'm sure I had moments like that too. I also had moments where I came out fighting, and at a certain point that all kind of evens out in the wash. Like, you get to an age where you're like, I neither am going to duck and cover, nor am I going to fight this battle because it's not worth it.
Exactly.
You make those choices.
I love that.
Too. You get to that point where you're like, man, I'm going to walk this line. You can be over there. I'll be over here. And that's
hey,
fine.
I'm good. Like, you don't have to. Absolutely fine. You do you,
Yeah. But I needed to learn through a little bit of friction. That was what I understood. That was what registered to me emotionally. That's what registered to me mentally. And so I like a little bit of friction in life because it gets people uncomfortable. And I know I've learned my biggest lessons by being uncomfortable. Like, it's not comfortable to learn. It's not comfortable to grow. Sometimes it's not always fun. And sometimes you need a little bit of friction. And I mean, as part of why I named my business Boldness Ablaze, like, there's a quality of fire to it. And when you add fire or heat to anything, it transforms it. It can destroy it. It can also transform it.
Wow.
And so I went from like being all fiery all the time and just torching everything to now I'm learning how to be more discerning about where to do that pushback, where to create that friction, where to step into the friction, and systematically like light little fires where they will serve a purpose versus just like burning everything to the ground.
So I have to say, Zovig, this is so interesting to me because I come at everything, like challenges, coaching. I love that we have met here in the middle because I come at things from the opposite side. For me, there's a gentle recognition. And I'm not saying that you don't recognize, right? We both have ways of creating a safe space for people. Absolutely. Right? And I would bet that the ways that we do that are so completely different. And so what's coming up for me in my mind is when you first started talking about New York and being there and stuff like that, I was remembering the first time that I went to New York, and I spent literally the whole day. It was one day. It was where you take the bus in and you go and you see a show and you have lunch, and I had fun, but I spent the whole day feeling critical of the clothes that I was wearing. I literally spent the whole day like, wow, this was the stupidest outfit. Like, you look at everybody else, they all look so amazing. And when I said it, so my brother actually lived in New York for a long time. And when I said that to him, that like, I didn't see him. Maybe he had already moved when that had happened or something I don't remember exactly. It can't have, because I saw him when he lived in New York. Anyway, there was a point at which I said to him, I went to New York and I just felt like I was so badly dressed or whatever. And he's like, that's such a bummer because that's the opposite of the vibe. Like, nobody cares what you're wearing. That's what's so good about it.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really interesting that like our two mindsets can be so different about the same city.
Yeah.
And and that we've kind of come to this place where we're both very comfortable within ourselves. We're comfortable with what we do. And the idea, I would love for you to speak a little bit more on the ways that you've encountered challenges, because even if you can think of one specific one, like one learning experience, not necessarily in New York, but that you have had.
Yeah.
I think it would be, I think it would be really instructive for listeners to hear about that.
Gosh, one challenge. I mean, I've had one big challenge that was very transformational for me was in 2017, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease and hyperthyroidism.
Oh.
I still manage it. It packed a punch the first year and a half. If you don't know what it is, your thyroid basically controls everything. And Graves' disease is an autoimmune disease that attacks the thyroid and makes it overactive, which causes hormones to go crazy, which causes overheating, irritability, high inflammation throughout the body, a lot of pain, agitation, jitteriness, heart palpitations, like, and the worst part was like my eyes were kind of bulging out of my head, like it causes thyroid eye disease. And that was for somebody who considered herself to be healthy, because I didn't eat flour or sugar for many, many years. I worked out 6-7 days a week. I ate all the good, quote unquote, good things. For me to then have this autoimmune, I was like stunned, scared, upset. I initially approached healing with, what do I have to do to make this stop? And so I did all of the things. I did the Western medicine. I did the Eastern medicine. I did like the acupuncture, I did all the things, right? The nutritionist, the this, the that, the different diets. I was still approaching it from a place of like, having to do and fix. Like, this is wrong. I must make it go away. It has to stop now. Versus, which this mindset, which I came to a few years later, and I'm still learning, is partnering with what's actually there in my body, to understand it, to listen to it, to treat it with some respect and some dignity, instead of doing 2 spin classes a day, teaching 2 yoga classes right after, walking everywhere, carrying bags, navigating people, having extreme emotions up and down, getting aggravated because this happened on the train, you know, losing my subway card, like whatever, all of the things that could really occur in a day in New York City. I was approaching it from that mindset, and as opposed to me saying, okay, what's going on here? How did this happen? And that for me is still a challenge, to partner with my body, to allow it to do what it's going to do. So that's one big challenge, I think. And then, you know, I mean, we have challenges every single day. I mean, dating was a challenge, and the roller coaster of that experience there, all the different personalities, all the different options, understanding that I was an option was a challenge for me.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Realizing that I was actually an option. And if it fit in the moment and the day of and the time that worked for this other person, then I was a good option. And if it didn't, then I was not a viable option. You know, that was a challenge for me. I didn't understand that. It was upsetting a lot. So, you know, does that answer your question? I mean, I feel like that the health challenges are probably the biggest one that comes to mind. I could talk about building my coaching business and what that's been like as a challenge. So, you know, there's a lot.
I think, well, I mean, we'll see where that goes, because I would love to talk about that, but I'm curious if play or playfulness entered your response once you kind of got on track with the, like, what is my body actually saying, doing? How can I partner with my body? Was that in any way playful? And if so, how?
I have to say, and I've never thought about it that way until you asked me that question. No, it is not a playful thing.
Yeah.
It hasn't been. That doesn't mean it can't be. It hasn't been. And I have to give some thought as to how I could make it playful. It's definitely not as upsetting to me as it was when it started. I've made peace with the fact that I have this. I will have to manage this for the rest of my life. It is not the end of the world. It is manageable, fortunately. You know, So, but I've never approached it from, I've approached it from a calmer, more reasonable perspective, but not one of play. And I'd have to give that a little bit of thought of what that would actually look like to apply that principle to
this.
managing a health challenge.
And so I think what comes up for me, well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for going there. I mean, I think, first of all, sharing your own vulnerability around something like a condition that you live with is, I think that takes a lot of guts. So I appreciate that you would even bring it up. And it does make me think about a health challenge that I have lived with for about a decade, which longtime listeners will know. I have a tendon condition, a tendon disorder, where my tendons, when overused or when I am stressed out, tendons in my body will develop scar tissue much, much faster when they get irritated than a typical person. And for me, the recovery of this was kind of all play. If I'm going to, like, I've never applied this filter to it either.
Yeah.
And if I think about the worst, the most awfulest parts of this for me were when I felt sidelined, when I felt like life is passing me by because I can't walk. Yeah. And like we'd be watching like a football game or a movie or something like that. And I wouldn't be paying attention to what was going on because I was just watching people walk.
Yeah.
And I felt so alone and like such a burden. And it wasn't until it was about 8 months in, that I met the person who made it playful for me. And it was a physical therapist. In fact, it was partly I had to get into water. I had to swim. Well, part of my physical therapy was called aquatic physical therapy. And there were just so many games that were associated with the true recovery, that it all began to feel like a game. And it meant that I could go back to playing the way that I love to play, which is to ski. Like 18 months after I met the new physical therapist, so more than 2 years after I had initially contracted this problem, I was able to ski again. Like I got up on a ski hill. And for me, that's being an athlete. I mean, it's funny because I don't look like an athlete really. I had not thought of myself as an athlete since I'd been in high school. And then I went and saw a sports medicine doctor who was like, as an athlete and as a 40-year-old athlete, you should be able to do a lot of things that you want to do, but are not currently able to do. And I was like, he just called me an athlete. Like what? And I became a certified yoga instructor 17 years ago. So like I had to stop doing that. And he's like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do these things. Like, let's work on this. Let's get you back. And it was all play. That was like how I recovered. And I know there's a huge difference in nature between our health challenges. I think it's so fascinating, the different ways that we respond, that people respond to things, and the differences that we have, and accepting what we have, accepting what is, and kind of moving on from there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a doer by nature, I'm a doer. I take action. To me, I was always concerned that if I wasn't taking action, then I wasn't going to get what I desired, and I needed to take action. What I'm learning now in my wonderful 40s is, which I love this age, is sometimes inaction is my best action. Sometimes action later, not right now in this very moment, is necessary. The way I approached my Graves' disease was, what action can I take? I can affect change. I'm an effective person. I know when I put my mind to it and I take action, things change. That goes for my body too. It will listen to me. No, it won't. Because the thing that was causing the Graves, a lot of what caused it was the level of intensity and stress that I lived in. And so here I was trying to heal it with that same intensity and stress.
Yeah.
And, if you're a doer and I mean, I hate the phrase type A personality, because I feel like, who's not a type A person? Like, who's not, but like, if you are an intense person that takes action, that makes things happen, and you've seen yourself succeed in creating change and being very capable, you're like, sure, if I just put all of that into this thing, I can do this. And so I had that approach for not only my body, but for a lot of the things that I did. It worked and it served me a lot. And then I started to see, I think for the first time when I was with my body, it was not serving me. That was the first time I saw that. And so my default to manage things, to respond to things, wasn't fun, play, or joy. It was task oriented. Let's get this fixed. So while I'm still interested in what would fun or play be like to manage this. I have no idea. You know, the energy and intensity to which I look at this now is very different, but I'm curious about what that might look like for myself. You know, I mean, fun is one of my top 5 core values. If it's not fun, I'm not doing it. You know, I need to laugh. I need to connect with you. I need us to enjoy each other. If I'm partnering with somebody on something, I need to have chemistry with my clients. I need to, even if I'm working on my own, I need to enjoy what I'm doing, the act of what I'm doing, the writing, the creating, the whatever it is, you know, sending out a proposal, like whatever. I need to have fun.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the freaking point?
Seriously,
what's the point? And for whatever reason, we get trained that if you are working, you cannot have fun. If you are trying to be effective, it cannot be joyful. It cannot be playful or silly. And I think that all of those things can exist at one time. You can do really good, meaningful work and it can still be playful. And you can crack jokes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the title of this episode is going to end up being, I need to have fun. Otherwise, what's the frigging point?
Otherwise, what's the frigging point?
It's so good. It's so good. So, our time is short, and I would love to hear from you about a way that play does come into your life right now. Like how you had mentioned your coaching practice before. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be professionally. Like, how does play show up for you?
Well, one, I think of my dog. We have 2 dogs. I adopted a pandemic puppy last year, and she is high energy, super, super, super affectionate, and very vocal and expressive, just like me. And so this dog keeps me and my partner on our toes. And he laughs at her sometimes. He's a much more grounded sort of, you know, he's earth element grounded. I'm a little more excitable. And so, you know, we respond to her in different ways, but oh my God, this dog makes us laugh. And she demands that we take her outside to throw the ball for her, you know, like probably 5 or 6 times a day for like 10 minutes. We're not talking long periods of time, but she marches in my office determined to get me to come outside with her. She tap dances, you know, behind me to try and get my attention. I'm like, all right, let's go. And then to see her do her little spins of excitement and jump up and run ahead and look back to make sure I'm following her. And then to be outside in the grass, in the sun, which right now it's sunny here in Seattle, which is great, to throw that ball for her and then to bounce it really high so that I get to watch her jump. It's so cute. And it just cracks both of us up. Like, and it gets me regrounded. It takes me out of the intensity of whatever I'm doing for my work. And it gets me regrounded with her because her only objective is fun. That is her only objective, is to have play. So that's one. And then probably the other thing is, honestly, my fiance and I, we make each other laugh. And I have to say, I have gotten very good at knowing what his funny bone triggers are. And so it is pure joy for me to make stupid jokes and make fun of commercials and plays on words, like ridiculous plays on words that no one would understand unless you were standing there. To have those moments, you know, I said something randomly yesterday to him and he was in the kitchen and he stopped what he was doing and bent over and started laughing. And those moments are so meaningful for me. Like you cannot be angry, upset, or intense about anything if you are laughing. And so I guess for me, the play is really laughter. Like laughter is what is the full expression of play for me.
Oh, that's beautiful. Laughter as the full expression of play.
Yeah.
I took a note, because a couple of times, especially while sharing about your pandemic puppy, that play is a grounding activity for you.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
It didn't really happen until I got the dog.
Yeah.
You know, there was nothing my schedule was my own. And now if you have an animal, and I know with children, especially, like, I can only imagine, I don't have any children myself, but, your schedule isn't 100% your own all the time, the way you want it.
Yeah.
And so she has needs. And most of the time when she comes in, unless I'm on a call, I could probably take 10 minutes to go and throw the ball for her, you
Yeah.
know? And I'm starting to look at it now as like, perfect timing, sweetheart. I needed a break anyway. Okay, that means I just need to step away and be outside. And it just takes me, I describe it as pulling the camera back so that I can see the full picture of everything. Because otherwise I'm just sitting at my desk, coaching with a consulting client, writing something, and you can get very focused. And when she comes in, she helps me become, like, to blur the focus a bit, to pull the camera away, get regrounded, like breathe fresh air, and just
That's amazing.
interrupt a little bit of the intensity so I can renew in a small way, I think. And then when I come back, I'm always more refreshed, my brain is better engaged, and I just feel good for having spent, time with her.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. There is something it's very similar to aspects of parenting. My husband, myself, and our oldest are all like pretty extreme introverts, although I do have the ambivert. Sometimes I just want to be partying, man. But that's not so true of my husband and our older son. So so especially when we started homeschooling, my son and I would have been very content to just sit around and read books in our pajamas all day. But that was not going to work for the extroverted younger son. And you can look at it two ways, right? You can be like, oh God, here he is again. He needs to go outside and play, for goodness sake. Like, fine, I'll set his aside. Or you can say, like, this is an opportunity to get outside in the grass, to giggle, to see them having fun. I mean, like, I can remember we would inevitably be drawn into something silly and wonderful, and it's so exciting that there is something like that in life. And until you mention it, I really hadn't thought of that as grounding, but it really is. It brings you back to what's most important.
Yeah. It just gets you out of your own head. Sometimes I
Yeah.
need to be, I'm always in my own head. And so she pulls me out of my own head.
Yeah. Yeah.
For not very important stuff, just for the sake of running. She just runs for the sake of running. That's it. And I just think it's all she cares about. And that's awesome. And I wish that I could she's there to remind me to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love it. There are so many good examples of that like, I can think of times when I would be watching my kids or children I was teaching or whatever, who you could see they're thinking of, like, what happens when for example, we have pictures of him. We used to have these two great big, like, stability balls almost. And I don't know how this occurred to our youngest, but what he started doing was he would set them up so that they were right next to each other. And he would take a running leap, and he would land on the first one on his belly and slide to the second one on his belly and, like, slide off of them both. And he'd be like, yes, you know what I mean? And it was just for the sheer joy of doing it. It's like, you can move your body in this way. Wow. And it also reminds me, and I wonder if you'll see this as a part of play as well. It demands your attention and your presence. Like, you can't be future thinking or regretting something in the past. You're here now playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Play is all consuming, like laughter is.
Yeah.
It can be if you choose it to be, right? And so I am making the conscious choice to take those 3, 4, 5 breaks during the day with her for 10 minutes to enjoy and play and watch her play and get joy from that. Because I could be out there worry-warding on my phone with one hand and, throwing the ball with the other. And I leave my phone in my office. And
awesome.
It's a choice every time, because I'm like, nope, she's here for a reason. She needs to go outside. I'm here for that. Let's go do it. And
wow.
But that was a discipline for myself. I didn't take to that right away.
Yeah.
you know, and once I just looked at her and I saw her face and I'm like, she has no agenda here. She's not doing this to make me mad. Like she has no agenda other than she just wants to see me outside with her. That's it.
Yeah.
How can I
Yeah.
say no to that? You know?
Yeah.
So she's taught me that.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
I think this is a fabulous place to wrap up our conversation. First of all, we're pretty well out of time, but second of all, I am so thrilled with where this went. And what you know what I love too, Zovig, is that we really met or got to talking because you were looking for a brainstorming partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's so neat. That's another way of playing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And being very, I think that there's a real presence to that. Like your brainstorming partners spur off each other and really, it's a bit like improv.
It is.
And I think that there's so much in play that is so good. And I want to say thank you so much to you for bringing that to us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was I've never really talked about this topic in this way. And so it was interesting for me to kind of see where it led us. So thank you.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Yeah, I one of my favorite things about the Play Research Project is it's not something that adults typically think about. And so a lot of the response is like, wow, like I never thought about that before. So I'm grateful that you came along on this ride.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And you can find Zovig Garboushian at her website, which I love the name of it. It's boldnessablazecoaching.com. And I will link to it in the show notes. If you want more from Zovig, you should definitely go there. I am signed up for her newsletters and they're wonderful and very empowering. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. I'm really glad you have been here today. I always wrap up with a special thanks to our producer, the man whose play really often involves like fishing, but it also involves music making and wordplay and silliness, and it's just such fun. He is not just the producer of our show, he's also the 24-time winner of the Husband of the Year Award, Benjamin Kolp. Thank you so much again for watching, for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.